I believe in God. I have enormous respect for religion. I'm a bad Jew, but I feel guilty about it. So I think there's hope for me. And so I'm perfectly happy to pull a Jeremy Corbyn and say it all starts with the Jews, right? But in a positive way, right? And so, my take on it would be that until the Jews come along, more or less, gods are our servants rather than our masters, right? There's a god for war, there's a god for fertility, you give them a bull, you sacrifice some pigeons, whatever, and they deliver. It's fee for service with gods, right? And every city-state has got its own god, it's, whatever.
God is gumball machine.
Exactly, yeah. And then it's God Uber, but for gods, right? and then the Jews come along and they say, no, man, you guys have got it completely wrong. Gods don't work. First of all, there's only one of them. And he doesn't work for you, you work for him, right? And he's watching you all of the time, which is a huge bummer, right? And a lot of things flow from this, including the sort of innate moral dignity of the individual, including, for the first time in ancient societies, women, right? But it's still basically this tribal thing, because it's just for the Jews, really, because they're in hostile territory. Mm-hmm. And then Christianity comes along. This is a sociological argument, but Christianity comes on and universalizes these Jewish precepts and says, no, everybody is worthy of dignity. Everybody is worthy of respect. The golden rule is pretty, important. Christianity also comes along and creates this vitally important thing for the emergence of capitalism and democracy, which is a social space where religion isn't dispositive of every question, right? So
the Augustinian city of God versus city of man.
Right. So it starts with Jesus saying, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? And then you have St. Augustine, and a lot of people don't seem to know that the city of God and city of man aren't places, they're states of mind, right? And so there's some people who are just good Christians, but they're going to live amongst people who aren't. Just simply on almost pragmatic terms, St. Augustine argues, you got to figure out a way for these people to live together without killing each other, because ultimately God is the only person who knows who's saved and who's not, right? And that creates social space. Fast forward to the religious wars of Europe. The Treaty of Westphalia was not no one said, oh, we fought these religious wars for 100 years because we think there's this wonderful principle of religious tolerance. They're like, damn it, we just can't kill all the Huguenots. I guess we're going to have to figure something out. And it's sort of it's tolerance because of martial exhaustion, right? and that's where concepts like free speech come out. The right to be wrong comes out of this social space that's created where no one institution can control everything. So one of the arguments I would make coming at this from a more secular perspective on it is, I entirely agree with you that you can go way too far with the reason stuff. I'm sort of a Hayekian in my bones, which also makes me sort of a Burkean in my bones. I think that there is more what the Hayekian types would call embedded knowledge in social customs and norms than we can get our heads around, right? There are, all of the cliches about how, your grandmother was right about everything. Well, your grandmother was right about everything because she inherited this vast amount of trial and error wisdom that had accumulated over centuries or millennia. And you just think about all the embedded knowledge that goes into virtually any cuisine you can eat, right? How many people died from eating this poisonous thing or this undercooked thing or this spoiled that until they figured out how to cook food? You don't see, it's like a price signal. You don't see all of the trial and error that goes into it. You just get the end product. And it's very much like Chesterton's fence. The problem is that we are raising people now that we're raising generations of people, including among intellectuals, I would say almost particularly among intellectuals, who think that just because they can't see the embedded wisdom and the trial and error that went into some custom or norm, there must not be any in it. Man does not live by bread alone. Man is as Will Herberg, one of my favorite intellectuals, would put it, man should probably be called homo religio. We are religious beings. You can make a very strong case that it was an evolutionary adaptation that allowed us to survive, because it breeds altruism and cooperation and all of these kinds of things.
Harari makes the case it allows you to expand beyond the 150-person group.
That's right, yeah. And I'm open to all those arguments. I'm also open to the transcendent arguments. Mm-hmm. My only point is that I think it's somewhere in Plato, he makes this point that if something is true, it's true for a lot of reasons, mm-hmm. right? The number of 4 is 4 because 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 4, but also because 2 plus 2 is 4, and all that kind of thing. You can come at it from a lot of different places, and one explanation doesn't invalidate other explanations. So it could all be just God's plan, or it could be evolution, or it could be both. But I certainly think that, a big part of my book is, Hannah Arendt liked to say, every generation, Western civilization is invaded by barbarians. We call them children, right? And that's basically a big chunk of the argument of the book right there, is this idea that you're not born into some abstraction. You're born into an actual family. And your family is what civilizes you. It's what models good behavior. It's what teaches you right from wrong. It's what teaches you how to use a knife and fork. It's, it teaches you all the little stuff and all of the big stuff. And it works on principles that have nothing to do with the market, right? I mean, I am literally, and I suspect you are too, you're far closer to a communist in your own family, right?
Of course.
Because in your own family, it really is from each according to their ability, each according to their need.
Joint bank account, the whole deal.
Yeah, you don't charge your kids for food yet, right? You don't charge them rent yet.
If they behave.
If they behave, right? I give my kid rain or shine when I have to leave town. I handcuff her to the radiator and I give her a bowl of kibble, whether she's been good or bad, because I'm that good a dad, right? And no, but my point is that the values of what Hayek would call the microcosm are not based on contracts and rationality. They're based on deep, powerful notions of solidarity and mutual obligation that are much better expressed and represented by religious concepts, by moral concepts, not by rational concepts. And so a big part of my, so Hayek in The Fatal Conceit talks about the microcosm and the macrocosm. In the microcosm, that's the world of kin, family, friends, where your values of reciprocity trump market notions, right? It's the Gemeinschaft versus the Gesellschaft. And in the macrocosm, that's the world where you deal with strangers. And one of the beautiful things about capitalism is it turns strangers from existential enemies into customers.
Right.
And so you can't take the values of the microcosm and impose them on the macrocosm without destroying liberty. You cannot take the values of the macrocosm and apply them to the microcosm without destroying the values and moral creating engine that is the family and civil society. And so the whole point is to keep them separate. Keep, sort of like the Reese's peanut butter cup commercial. You got to keep the Gemeinschaft out of the Gesellschaft. and if you can do that, everything works. If you treat your family like it's a business enterprise, you're going to destroy your family. If you treat the extended order of liberty like it's a family, where the president is our father, you're going to destroy liberty. And so you got to keep these things separate. And capitalism is downstream of the value creating engine that is the family. And this is part of my point about why I say all of the stuff that is around us is an accident, right? I mean, one of the most common explanations for where capitalism comes from is Max Weber's Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. I think there's a lot of merit to it, right? But what I always want to point out is, even whether it's true or not, and I think the idea that like Protestants invented savings is a little iffy for me, right?
Right, and Venice was engaged in a fair bit of commerce for a long time.
But even if you take it on its merits, or its best face forward, it's still an accident, right? The Calvinists and the Puritans, they didn't say, if you behave this way, you'll get rich. They said, if you behave this way, odds are it's more likely that you might get into heaven. And it turns out that when you change your internal habits of the heart and your morals to things like thrift, delayed gratification, honest dealings, you're actually going to do better in business. But it wasn't the prosperity gospel, right? Mm-hmm. And so the fact is that that capitalism will fail if we don't civilize the barbarians that are born into our family to be citizens in this civilization. And I argue that one of the reasons why we have identity politics and all these other problems that are coming up is precisely because of family breakdown, because civil society is eroding. I mean, people are retreating into their homes to watch politics and stuff as an entertainment rather than
they're finding a tribe outside their family.
Yeah, and these artificial tribes suck. Again, to borrow from social science. And Facebook is fine for keeping up with your old friends that you met in the real world. It is horrible for actually creating a sense of real community, because virtual community is not community.
Yeah.